Good morning or good afternoon. Welcome everyone to the Sustainability Speaker Series for the federal community. I'm Michelle Hawkins, Director for Strategic Initiatives here in the Office of the Federal Chief Sustainability Officer's Office in the White House Council on Environmental Quality. Again, thank you all for being here with us today. In support of President Biden's federal sustainability plan, the speaker series is designed for federal employees to enhance our sustainability and climate literacy, to learn more about the president's federal sustainability plan, and to learn more about our critical role in the shift to more sustainable and resilient operations. So I'm really excited about today's event. We've got a dynamic speaker with us today, but before we get started, I need to cover a few housekeeping items. The event is being recorded, and you can find this recording as well as previous recordings and information on future events on our website at sustainability.gov. We will not be using the raised hand feature in the webinar interface, but we did get a lot of questions. We reviewed those questions, and we used those questions to inform today's discussion. Again, thank you all for being here with us today. And now I have the honor of turning it over to the Federal Chief Sustainability Officer, Andrew Mayock.
Thank you, Michelle. And let me take the opportunity to thank Michelle for all the work that she's done here in 2022 to deliver a really extraordinary program for the federal family. And what an incredible series of speakers, and what a great way to end it here this year with Lisa Jackson. Going back to Catherine Hayhoe and Bill Nye and Danelle Baird, we've just had a really extraordinary group of folks who have given us their time, as Lisa has today, to share with us their insight. And so we're really looking forward to that conversation. As we do during the speaker series, we've got a couple slides for everyone up front to bring you in on the latest and greatest of President Biden's sustainability plan. So a couple slides before we dive into the conversation with Lisa. I think as we hit this next slide, we have a reminder of the overview of the federal sustainability plan. It's coming up in a minute, but the big idea is that we've set the federal government on a pathway to decarbonization no later than 2050. Little introductory slide here, in addition to these lovely black security boxes which pop up with our version of Zoom. Also reminding folks that the CSO's office resides in the White House and the Council of Environmental Quality, and we work very closely with CSOs across the agencies to go deliver on President Biden's sustainability plan. Next slide. And here's this core slide about where President Biden wants us to be and how we're leading into these goals in these years. Bottom line is net zero government no later than 2050. Most importantly, as President Biden often reminds us, it's the work that we do here in 2022, 2023, and really delivering in this decade of the 2020s that's going to get us to these goals. We've got a couple highlights of progress from this year on the next two slides. Won't go through this very busy slide, and the good news here is the slide's very busy, so a lot has been accomplished. As we note there up at the top, is points on the board is how we've been referring to the outcomes and the achievements of this year as we build the long-term systems in order to deliver on such big projects like electrifying the full fleet of 640,000 vehicles, or completely moving our electricity consumption from the current 40% carbon-free electricity to 100% no later than 2030. But we've had some great achievements this year that we wanted to share with you all. One, you delivered on moving federal government acquisition of light-duty vehicles from 2% in 21 to 12% this year. That is at a time when the American public is purchasing EVs at a rate of approximately 6%. So a real example of the federal government leading by example. Also had the opportunity just in the last couple of weeks, which we announced at COP27, that we have the first 100% 24/7 CFE tariff working towards that in Arkansas with Arkansas Energy, and a number of other highlights that we've shared and experienced this year. Heading to the next slide. The critical part of accomplishment for this year is doing what we're doing here today, is gaining the wisdom, insight, experience of Lisa as during her time in the federal government, and then most importantly, is her time at Apple and all she's been able to do with her team to deliver a world-beating sustainability agenda and deliver real results on that agenda. Other things that we've accomplished on this broader part of the plan include the announcement that we made at COP27 as well, where we have almost 20 countries signed up to do what we're doing here, which is put national government operations on a pathway to net zero by 2050 or sooner. A number of other countries with a bit of a smaller footprint are looking at 2030, 2040 to deliver on their goal, but they've joined with us and we're seeking to expand that group. Next slide. So welcome, wonderful to have you back at the Sustainability Speakers Series. We have a number of ideas about how to proceed in 2023 and look forward to that. I think a big takeaway here as we end this slide portion is go check out more on sustainability.gov. There's lots of information about where we are, where we're headed, how we're doing, and look forward to the continued partnership and community that we're building here today. We have one more slide and then we'll dive into the conversation. There it is, sustainability.gov, and you can reach us and see us at White House CSO on Twitter, and also reach us by email at sustainability.gov if we're not already in email contact. And with that, I am so proud to welcome back Lisa Jackson to the federal government. She is, as I think everyone knows dialing in here, Apple's Vice President of Environment, Policy, and Social Initiatives. And in that role, she oversees Apple's efforts to minimize its impact on the environment. And they're doing things like moving forward on, in seriously world-beating ways on engaging their supply chain to squeeze out emissions, to gain more and most renewable energy to not only power Apple, but to power Apple's suppliers. Lisa also in this role leads Apple's Racial Equity and Justice Initiative, which is focused on education, economic empowerment, and criminal justice reform. And she's also responsible for Apple's education policy program. So a small portfolio, Lisa, that you have there in your current role, not to mention the role that you played inside the federal government as administrator of the EPA during the Obama administration and all that you did at that time to help move forward the environmental agenda in the Obama era. We're standing on your shoulders here, and we're looking forward to your wisdom as we dive into the conversation. And kicking off the conversation, well, let me just turn it over for you, Lisa. I've got a number of questions, as Michelle noted. We've got a bunch of questions that came in from the audience before we started this conversation. We've put those in the hopper. We're ready to have the conversation with you, building on those. But any remarks you have as we kick off here?
First, hi everybody. I guess hi to my former colleagues. A special hello to my alma mater, right? EPA is, I spent just about 25 years, give or take a month or two at EPA, part of them on an IPA to the state of New Jersey. So shout out to federal government careers and all the opportunities that it afforded me and all the career growth that I saw there. But mostly just, you know, this is such important work that it's my honor to take a few minutes today to be able to spend some time with this team and to, if nothing else, encourage and tell you that it can feel tough in the beginning. I know many of you have probably been working in this area for a very long time, so it's not the beginning, but you have this amazing wind at your back with the sustainability plan and resources that are coming into play from infrastructure and inflation reduction that are going to help prime the pump on the private sector side and the local and regional government side. That's all super important. And what we found at Apple, and I know you're finding, or hope you're finding as well, is that it just becomes this virtuous cycle. And before you know it, what seemed like the start of cranking, you know, the machine starts to operate and you start to see that payoff. So hang in there if you're in that moment when you don't feel like things are happening, but congratulations on all the work that you've done, and how lucky are we to be in a time when people are really prioritizing this set of issues.
Those are important words. There are definitely highs and lows on this journey, Lisa, as you know, and we experienced, you know, both of them in a single day here. And thinking about what's happened in 2022, as you just pointed out, We end this year, looking back on where we were last year at this time, at an incredible high. It's almost a year ago that the bipartisan infrastructure law was passed. The CHIPS law came into being since then, and of course the Inflation Reduction Act, from a pure legislative example. As you point out, we've got the wind at our backs in ways that during certain points of the year didn't seem that was necessarily going to come into being. So I think a lot of us, when we were asked about, how are we going to pay for this? Where's the market on this? We're in a much more stronger place here at the end of 2022 than at the start of 22. And we're really grateful to be in that position. Turn to your current experience at Apple. The company's already carbon neutral for its corporate operations and on the road for one day being carbon neutral for its product, inclusive of supply chain and the entire life cycle of products. Can you tell us a little bit about, speaking of those highs and lows and progress you've made to get there, tell us a little bit about progress to date.
Sure. Apple has been running on 100% renewable energy since 2018. Since 2020, as you noted, we've been carbon neutral as a company. So most people look at their scope 1 and 2. That we've been carbon neutral there now going on 2 years. We are, what I love about Apple, one of the reasons I was so excited to come after the best job in the world, which was heading the EPA, was to start a second career working with the best company, the most innovative company, because we as a company, we're a product company, we're engineers, we're software and hardware engineers, and we love doing big things and taking on big challenges. So where we are is we're sort of in the middle of both of the two big challenges we've set for ourselves on the sustainability goal. The first one being to be carbon neutral for all of our scope 1, 2, 3 emissions. So that includes the energy used to charge our devices around the world, no matter where our customers and users are. So that's a really fun one because it means you have to work on clean energy and work to increase clean energy markets around the world. And then the second, I think, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, I saw one of the questions is around the circular economy, the idea that one of the primary strategies we have for reducing our carbon footprint is to use more recycled material or renewable material in our actual products. So those are two separate but related goals. And we're about 20%, I think, of our products last year were recycled material. And so we're across all of our product family. And so we're making progress there as well. And they both have to, 2030 is 8 years away. So we have to keep going.
And that's that leadership and the progress you've made, just taking the renewable energy as an example. President Biden in the sustainability plan that he announced a year ago, Thursday, directed us to get on a pathway to be carbon-free electricity, fully 100% carbon-free electricity consumers no later than 2030, with as much of that being 50%, but as much as 50% being 24/7. And so one of the things that we've done is we've gotten the federal government onto that journey is go around and talk to leaders like yourself and your team to figure out how you've done it. And so I just want to say a word of thanks here for helping us out. We've talked to a number of other leaders in the space too, but we're, in many ways, restarting the engine at the beginning of this administration to go do this kind of work. We lost a number of people in the prior administration, and we just don't have that capacity because we weren't on that journey before as well. And so learning from Apple, learning from others that have gone before us, helping put us on a journey where we can actually go achieve that 100% carbon-free electricity goal. So wanted to say thanks for that work, as well as hearing a little bit about it. One thing, speaking of renewable energy and leadership in this space, is you recently made an announcement calling on your supply chain to use renewable energy across all Apple-related production. Can you tell us a little bit about that and share any insights that we might also, take away again on our own journey?
Yeah, actually, we've been working with our suppliers since before we got to 100% renewable energy. So I mentioned we got to 100% in 2018, but a couple of years before that, we started working with our suppliers as well. Now, a couple of things, especially on the private sector side, government's a little different. We thought it was super important that we be close to 100% renewable ourselves before we turned around to our supply chain and said, okay, now we want you to be there. Obviously it's leadership by example, but it's also leadership by innovation. What we had to do was show that there was enough technology out there to be able to support the energy needs of a company like Apple, which are not small. We have stores around the world, over 400 retail stores. We have offices and campuses around the world. We run R&D facilities around the world. And so all those different kinds of needs are, and then of course, eventually we also run some of our own manufacturing. So all of those had to be tackled in order for us to be able to go now to others and say, see, you need to do this as well. And so we started by doing it. I would say the other thing that's really important is to tackle one or two of the hard problems first. It sounds a little counterintuitive, but for us, for example, it was data centers. Because a data center cannot go down, you cannot lose energy. You have to be able to, ensure that first and foremost, those servers, those machines stay on and that they're secure and all those wonderful things, but you also want them to run on clean energy. Apple started with data centers because we felt if we could show that a data center can be 100% renewably powered, then that means a lot of other cases that aren't as demanding would be easier. And it actually worked out that way. So one hint I have is to pick one or two of the harder cases that you're facing. Don't pick them all. Look across the government, look across however you want to split it up, but pick one and say, there's something about a lighthouse project that helps people realize that this ambition is the future, and it gives people a chance to rally around sort of the hard questions just as much as the maybe no-brainers. So then we move to our supply chain, and really two very interesting lessons I have to pass on there. The first is that you would think that the first question from a supplier would be, well, who's going to pay for this? But because we're now living in a time where, in general, clean energy is cheaper or cost competitive with conventional, dirtier forms, more polluting forms of energy, it's really a matter of what the payback period is and whether or not you're going to be around with me during that payback period. So you have an incredible amount of leverage because the federal government's not going anywhere. And so it was less about the money needed and more about, am I going to be able to make these investments as part of our business relationship and over the amount of time that it's going to need for me to see a return. The second is that for many, many companies, especially the small to mid-sized companies, it's not a matter of not wanting to do it. Many of them care deeply about this issue, or more likely, they're hearing it from their younger employees, their younger workforce, or the part of the workforce who's much more engaged, or their own, kids. And so they say, look, we're in. We don't know what to do. And we don't have the money in our budget for an army of engineers to go hire an A&E firm to tell us how to switch to renewable. Can you help us? So the other thing we've done is we've put information online and in person with our procurement agents to help them understand how they could switch to clean energy. For some places, it's just a matter of purchasing clean energy on a grid. It's not very many places like that, but it's increasingly an option for many businesses. A lot of businesses think, oh, that means I have to go build solar panels and install them, or I have to become a wind developer or a geothermal developer. No, we're not asking you to do that. What we're asking you to understand is, what are the options? And then as you talk about some of your larger suppliers, they could invest in a new renewable energy development project. You know, they could potentially be a larger investor in clean energy development than a smaller one can. So, and you have to work with your utilities or your power providers wherever you are in the world. So it's actually the two most important things are know-how, you know, passing on that technical assistance and information. And that's probably a role your office is spending a lot of time on, Andrew. And I think that's a really good use of time. We play that role for our suppliers. And then also helping them understand the financial impact. And again, it's about payback period. This is not a sunk cost. And in some cases, it can actually, if you're actually in clean energy development, if you're investing, you might even make a little money on the project. But it really depends on the company and where they sit.
Yeah, very, very helpful. And it's a funny thing about a company the size of Apple. It's applicable too to a public sector entity as large and as sprawling as the federal government. You know, like you, we've got a whole host of suppliers in the form of utilities all across, you know, vast geography, 330 utilities, as a matter of fact, in the United States alone that help serve us with electricity. And, you know, to your point about pick and choose, we've got to be very strategic about how and when and with whom we lean in. And so that's part of the process that the team, interagency team is doing right now is identifying, well, who are those biggest suppliers of 330 and how do we start focusing on them sooner rather than later? And then two, to the technical assistance point, is we've got some great competency in this space in places like General Services Administration, Department of Defense, who do a lot of the buying right now, and Department of Energy. And how do you get that to a place like your former home of EPA, which is, you know, focused on different things when it comes to the procurement of purchasing. So we're trying to get that TA, just as you mentioned, to the places that need it so they can most efficiently join in. So it's a big part of this journey that we're on. Doubling back a little bit to your note about materials. I thought that was really interesting as you're looking at product too from a sustainability perspective, and how you're seeking to get gains out of what you're producing. And I noted that there's, you know, Apple's material efficiency work is supporting that 2030 goal, and it shows up in your products and packaging. And just to hear a little more about that and how you're working through that.
Yeah, thanks. It's really interesting because I think those two lines of climate and resource efficiency, which are two of our three priority areas in the environment program here at Apple, how much they've come to intersect and sort of run together in many ways. You know, there are hundreds of different materials in our products. I like to say most of the periodic table is in there somewhere. And some of those are rare earth materials. Some of them are can be from conflict zones. And of course, we have laws to ensure that we're not incorporating material that's from a conflict zone. So we have all these sort of material requirements that we have to meet. Those are regulatory. But then on top of that, we started to see the opportunity in recycled material. And you can see I think you can see the climate opportunity. Like, you know, take aluminum, which is a material that we use a lot of. It's in the enclosures, the cases that can be, say, around an iPad or an iPhone. And that material is highly recyclable, but we have very, very tight specs on the quality and grade of material because we care about durability and other things. And so we started to realize, hey, the best source of some of our material that we want to use are in the products. We've already put, if you think about it in a carbon sense, we've already spent carbon getting that material, not us, but some supplier somewhere has mined it, refined it, smelted it, and then, of course, formed and pressed it into shapes. All that energy, if you use recycled material, you can take out everything except the last steps, which is the shaping, you know, the remelt, and the reshaping of material. So that huge amount of energy, which in the case of something like aluminum is a lot of energy used, as well as a lot of direct carbon emissions from the smelting process. All of that we can get rid of by using recycled aluminum, but we don't stop with aluminum. We look at 14 priority materials. Those 14 materials, which we selected based on how much of them we use in our products, also whether or not there are any concerns, as I mentioned, rare earth, but also they can be hard to get, or they might, we have to be careful about how we source them. Those all became priorities for us to find recycled sources, because if it's recycled, we don't have to worry about, conflict, because it's coming from somewhere where no one was harmed in the recycling process, right? So that's important for us. Those 14 materials represent about 90% of our products by weight. So if we can get those 14 right, and we can move to 100% recycled in them in all of our products, that's how much resource conservation, which is incredibly important when you're making hardware, when you're making physical products, but also, potential for carbon reductions in each and every product. So we can see the carbon footprint of a product go down as the amount of recycled material in the product goes up. And that's one of those happy coincidences. Early on, we really hadn't studied as much the impact that recycled material could make on our products. But as we've learned more and insisted on more recycled material, we work with a lot of suppliers around the world to put more recycled material into markets around the world. It's difficult to do, but really interesting work. We've learned more and more about that connection. One of my favorite stories is when I got here, I'm a chemical engineer by training, and one of the engineers here blew my mind and said, "Hey, why don't we invent a new way to smelt aluminum?" And I thought, okay, this is different. But we, last year or a couple of years ago, actually invested in a process that smelts aluminum without a carbon anode, because that carbon anode is a sacrificial anode. As you smelt the aluminum, it's going up in emissions and it's emitting CO2. So we actually invested in a process called ELYSIS, which uses a different anode, so that you also you emit no CO2 during the smelting process. So we have, look, I'm nerding out, but we have tons of fun. You have to really deeply understand what it is your supplier, is doing. And of course, that's different depending on where you are in the government. You could just be, you could look for energy, but you could also be looking, if you're at GAO, you're looking at materials of all kinds and you're trying to decarbonize those. So the possibilities are endless. And I think that's my last lesson, which is you have to focus and prioritize.
Yeah.
You can do a lot of things, right? But you have to focus.
Yeah, that's really inspiring. And then there's a lot of us now around the government that are involved in a similar process, and to hear about how you're doing it at Apple and how it's succeeding and the challenges and where it originates is super interesting to hear. And it's reminding me of, sharing with the folks who are joining us today. The president kicked off in his sustainability plan a year ago, a Buy Clean initiative to make sure that the government's doing what you just mentioned too. You're insisting your suppliers, provide materials to your specs that are achieving your sustainability goals. So the president said the same thing to us: use the power of the federal footprint to catalyze the market for lower embodied carbon materials. And so a whole team of people across a number of agencies, including your former agencies, are out there building this Buy Clean plan and program and initiative, so that when the government goes to build a new building, we're getting the lowest carbon concrete possible. We're getting the lowest carbon asphalt, flat glass, steel. And so we've decided to focus on a core set of products that are mainline carbon issues for us in our supply chain, and attack it in very similar ways to what Apple's doing with your supply chain. And I think it's a testament, what you just shared with folks, that it works. When a big important market signal like an Apple goes out and says, this is what we need to move forward, you can, and with some assistance and some partnership with your supply chain, you can get it, and you can really move the market in profound ways. Again, we really appreciate your time. Is there any, ask you for any closing thoughts about your pathway forward, our mutual collective pathway forward as we continue on our sustainability journey.
Oh yeah, no, I am. I could talk all day about this. I am. It makes me happy to be a little bit back in the federal family and to know there's so many people, so many good people. Know this, that the work you're doing prepares you well to interface with the private sector. You are the set of skills that I think has most served me here at Apple, and Apple is a wonderful place, is that you have to collaborate. You have to think about stakeholders. We all work in a fishbowl in the federal government, or we should be transparent. It should be people understand and see, because we work for the people. They pay our salaries, right? And so that set of skills that you have around always thinking about all the different folks who might be impacted by a policy or something you're trying to do, and how to do it in a way that actually increases equity. We didn't get a chance to talk about environmental justice, but I know that is part of it, our racial equity program. I'm as proud of the work we do, the charitable work we do, as our impact accelerator, which is designed to grow more Black and Brown owned businesses that work in the environmental space. I mean, we have to also think about how to make sure that the people most impacted by climate change also see the benefit of the tremendous amount of policymaking and lawmaking that has happened over the past 2 years. So super important. I didn't get to talk about plastics. That's a huge one too. Cutting down on plastics. Apple's committed to removing all plastic from our packaging by 2025, but we're down, I think 75 or 80% just in the last few years in terms of plastic, everything from, films and plastic wrap that you don't find on our products. So there's tons of what will seem to be low-hanging fruit, each one of which will sometimes make you feel like you're going down a rabbit hole all of its own, but be bold. My last words are be bold. In your striving to push the system, once you do, it's like, once you get that machine going, then you will start to feel like it's starting to move on its own. What the market needs most from the extraordinarily powerful hand of the government is a strong, unrelenting signal that this is not just words on paper. And y'all are the ones that are going to do that. So thank you for that. On behalf of my family, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And to the point I didn't get to talk about, we welcome you back on any occasion. It would be great to hear more about plastics. It would be great to dive into racial equity and justice as a core part of the president's agenda, as you know, and a core part of the work that we're doing here. So, so much to talk about when we're talking about sustainability, but so much you've shared in this brief time. So can't thank you enough. All the best to you for what remains of 2022. And as we head into 2023 here. Thank you.
Happy holidays, everybody. Get back to work. I know we have.
Thank you. And thank you all for joining us. You can learn more about future events on our website at sustainability.gov. And we look forward to seeing you in 2023. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.